The world is going through a troubled time. In India, some state governments have notified that for the next 3 months, the landlord should allow their tenants to stay without paying rent. Does that mean you are not liable to pay? Well, I will cover the next few questions in this video. Firstly, in this situation of uncertainty, how are the landlords dealing with the tenants? Or being a tenant, how are we going to talk to the landlord about rent? And lastly, I will share my opinion as what you should do and should not do, whether you are a landlord or a tenant. But before starting with the video, please subscribe to this channel Vincent Legal to motivate me to make more legal awareness videos in simple language. Primarily, if you are a tenant, continue paying your rent, because if you stop paying rent, your landlord has every right to evict you from his premises. Secondly, if you stop paying the next 3 months, then your liability to pay continues. That means after 3 months, you have to clear arrears of the past 3 months due. Now, if you are not in a position to pay rent, maybe you have lost your job or your business is closed for a long time, then connect to your landlord as early as possible and clearly explain your situation and try to understand his side also. Because honestly, all landlords are not that rich. There are a number of senior citizens whose only source of income is rent. So if you stop paying rent, their income will also come to a halt. Even though you are not paying rent, but still you have to pay your electricity bill, water bill, because government cannot just waive off all these expenses. Hence, communication with your landlord is very essential. Now coming to the landlord. First thing to keep in mind is not to panic. Just acknowledge the fact that you are not the sole person or landlord who is facing this problem. Remember one thing, whatever be the situation, you still have an asset. That is the building which you can utilize now or maybe later on. But those who are staying in your rented apartment, they consider the premises to be their home. Now, if they lose their job and above that, you ask them to leave their home, it is not something which is expected at this hour. So please empathize with your tenant. Having said that, generally there are clauses in the rent agreement that if the tenant fails to pay rent for 1 or 2 months consecutively, you have the right to bar access of the tenant. But considering the current scenario of job loss, recession, business failure, try to understand that the tenant might be genuinely under stress. So again, instead of threatening the tenant, the only resolution is to connect with your tenant, explain that the rent is your only source of income and you might have your outstanding bank loan, property taxes to be paid off. And you will also be in trouble if your tenant does not pay the rent. So both of you need to chalk out a plan. I'll give various workable options. Try this out according to your situation. Firstly, the landlord can waive off the rent for next 3 months, but after that the tenant has to pay the full rent, including the area 3 months due. Secondly, if the tenant is not in a position to pay the full rent, they can give partial payment and adjust the rest in the coming few months. The landlord can either adjust the rent from the advance amount given at the time of signing the rent agreement. Now, if the tenant has lost his job and is willing to vacate the premises, the landlord should be intimated accordingly so that he can also start finding a new tenant. Now, if you have rented for any commercial purpose, keep on reminding that the rent is due so that once the lockdown is over, the tenant can start off thinking new business only after paying your dues. Well, I am trying to give these solutions because, say, in order to evict a tenant, the landlord has to give a legal notice and then civil proceedings will follow. Now, keeping in mind the number of pending cases in court, it's better to resolve among both the parties. Secondly, if the tenant vacates the premises, now considering the current economic scenario, you will have a hard time to find a new tenant. Now, if the tenant feels that my landlord is not humane, then he has to start finding a new place. Remember, wherever you go, you have to pay a lump sum advance deposit. So whatever you do, think twice, because both the tenant as well as the landlord has never faced this situation before. So be compassionate to each other. Stay safe. Thank you all for watching.